Sometimes it's the things that make us most comfortable that are the things we actually have to shed if we want to make some progress and grow in our life. It's okay, leave everything you know, go into the desert and eat crackers and die, right? And out of that, your offspring will enjoy some benefit. That's difficult. Our ego doesn't like that, but our spirit is nourished by it. Hey everybody, it's Gabe again with Woven Wings, and I'm excited to be making you a video today as this evening is the beginning of Passover in the Jewish calendar. And whether you're Jewish, religious, not religious, I think as we explore a lot on this channel, there are always opportunities to learn and gain insight, especially in our modern world when we look at these more ancient traditions. And I want to point out a couple elements of the Passover story and holiday that relate to our lives today as people seeking meaning, engaged in spiritual practices, whatever it is that you're seeking to uplift in your own life. So stay tuned here as we look at some of those key elements. You remember the story of Moses and the Israelites in slavery in Egypt and leaving Egypt, being taken out of Egypt into the desert and eventually to the land of Israel. Now, what most folks don't understand about the story is that this is really documenting an archetypal process, a journey from slavery and illusion into liberation and genuine spiritual connection with life. Okay, and so in that sense, it really reflects all sorts of different things like that Joseph Campbell talks about in The Hero's Journey, or that we see in popular movies like The Matrix or Star Wars, or that you see reflected in other spiritual and religious traditions, like the journey of the Buddha leaving the palace that he was born in, and then going through a series of trials before finally attaining enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. So I want to point out some of the elements here in the Passover story that are similar in that way. In the Passover story, the Israelites are slaves to a king in Egypt, Pharaoh, who imagines himself as a god. And there is a lot of spiritual technology in Egypt. Pharaoh's advisors can do all the same things that Moses can do. However, the way that that power is utilized is in the construction of pyramids. You know, the story is in the building of bricks, to the utilization, the exploitation of others to amass wealth and power. And so that's why Egypt is in the story referred to as Mitzrayim, the narrow place, the place of bondage. In the story, as God comes to Moses and comes to the Israelites and tells them to go out, there's a lot of fear and resistance. So even though the Israelites are slaves and they're in a bad situation, they also experience the benefits of comfort, right? Of material comforts, which is something that I think many of us can relate to in today's day and age. So it's a bad situation, but it is comfortable. And so there's a resistance to leaving. And that resistance makes sense when what actually transpires is after a series of plagues and issues, arguments that happened between Moses and Pharaoh, Pharaoh finally allows the Israelites to go. And the reward for the Israelites getting up all the courage to leave behind everything that they've known, put all their belongings on their back, not even finish baking their bread, which I'll talk more to in a second, and go out into the desert. What is their reward? Well, it's exactly that. It is to be in the desert and to wander in the desert. And there are some ins and outs of the story that follows. However, the main upshot is that everyone who leaves Egypt, who is of adult age, ends up wandering around in the desert for 40 years and dying before they get anywhere that they want to go. And so that may seem like a harsh moral or a harsh outcome to the story, and I won't disagree with you there. But at the same time, it is a truth, a teaching about the nature of life and of spiritual life, that sometimes it's the things that make us most comfortable that are the things we actually have to shed if we want to make some progress and grow in our life. And when we're becoming dedicated to actually living a meaningful life, a spiritually vibrant life, we are faced with an opportunity or a necessity really of making sacrifices, of giving up some of our comforts, just in the way that the Buddha had to leave the palace and encounter suffering, to realize the reality of death, of struggle in life, before he could attain realization. It's the same thing for all of us, and it's the same thing for the Israelites in this story. In order for them to be able to go to the promised land, so to speak, they have to first decide that they're going to leave Egypt, leave the place of bondage and suffering, and then face this interim period where it's doesn't seem that great, right? They actually have to go wander in the desert. And anyone who's been sky gazing, stargazing at night in the desert, or been out there at the spring when the flowers are blooming, know that the desert is a beautiful place, and it's full of life, and it's full of power and mystery, the vastness of it. It makes sense why it is a place of spiritual development. But at the same time, the desert is the desert. There isn't water there. There is not food and shelter. And so you're really placed into the hands of nature, of the divine, to be able to find your way there. All of that is symbolized in the flattened bread, the matzah, that Jews eat when observing the Passover holiday. Okay? And that matzah represents, as I said earlier, when the Israelites finally decided it was time to go and they got the green light, they didn't have time to pack. They couldn't bake all their food and bread. And so they took these unleavened breads with them on their back. Okay? Now, that, is kind of the upshot of it that I like to say, in jest, is that, so basically the story is, okay, leave everything you know, go into the desert and eat crackers and die, right? And out of that, your offspring will enjoy some benefit. Okay, it's harsh, but maybe there is some truth to that. But if we look at the metaphor of the bread, of the matzah, that unleavened bread, we see that really there is this element of the ego that's present. When we become comfortable, even if we're in slavery in a certain way, we become comfortable and we start to inflate the same way that bread rises in the oven. Our ego begins to grow. And so when we come to Passover, to the moment when it's time for us to journey into the wilderness, we have the opportunity to be punched down and to have to eat bread that's unleavened, that's not quite so tasty, that's dry in the mouth, that's difficult. Our ego doesn't like that, but our spirit is nourished by it. Our spirit is humbled by the reality of what that offers, and it brings us closer to the ground. It brings us closer to our connection with the divine. Okay, so wherever you're at in the spectrum, I hope that this video is helpful in connecting with some of the meaningfulness of what's going on today with the beginning of this holiday. And I hope that whether you consider yourself religious or spiritual or agnostic or atheist, and whatever religion you might ascribe to, that you can find some meaning and value from this story that you can apply in your own life. Where are you exploring liberation? Where are you trapped in the chains, the invisible chains of bondage? And what are the steps that spirit, life, nature is calling on you to transform those patterns and begin a process of liberation and renewal? Okay, I'm really wishing you all the best as you make your own journeys into the desert, and may we all be renewed for a fulfilling year this year. And I'll see you all next time. Thanks for tuning in.